Good evening. This is Dale Lamb, Gardner Webb. This is Mels 603 on Wednesday, October the 20th. This is our seventh regular meeting. We were on break last week. Let's look at where we are course-wise at our weekly schedule. Okay, for week 7. Technology, social media, and cyber issues. Most of you have already completed your weekly assignment on cyberbullying, finding what policy your school and school district has. Very good job on those. Please remember, your discussion boards have to be done, but it's your option when you do them. But try to stay up with your evidence artifacts. I see this week the OMAC is doing discussion board for peer review. Some of the early returns on those. Let me remind you that OMAC is about auditing your special populations in your school. There are more special populations than just exceptional children. That is one of the special populations in your school. The others that you should also audit and analyze are academically gifted, English as second language or LEP, limited English proficiency, your intervention referral students that come to your intervention team, and Title I if you have that. So if you have those programs in your school, you need to audit those as well because they are special. They also are special programs, special populations. Now, a note in terms of practicality here. This is a law, finance, and facilities course. The law in North Carolina is very clear on what's called school-based committees. Anything that's under the purview of the school is called a school-based committee, and that means the principal is ultimately responsible for legally carrying out the duties and responsibilities of that particular population or that group. Your intervention team at your school, and yes, you have one even if it's a high school, but especially if you're in elementary school, you have an intervention team that teachers refer kids who are having academic and or behavior issues to that team. That team generally starts with the multi-tiered support system process of 90 days, and then if the student's not being successful, they go another 90 days through the EC process before a testing decision is made. Now, if something goes wrong with that process, that intervention team process, that's on the principal, not the EC teacher. The EC teacher is generally on the intervention team, but only as a resource and a reference person. If something goes wrong with the EC head count, that falls back on the EC department chair or your coordinating teacher, your CT for your EC, Exceptional Children's Services, if you're in a district that has those. But if you if something goes wrong with intervention, say for example, is in one local district, students were being sent for EC testing long before their 90-day required period was up, that comes back to you as principal, and you won't get to be principal much longer. So please remember, EC is a federal program. There are buffers between you and the principal. I mean, between before they get to the principal, like the EC department chair or the coordinating teacher, the CT, but not so with intervention team and not so with some of these others. If they're not getting what they need and you get sued, then it's going to fall back on you as principal. So you need to make sure that you understand how those special populations work as well as exceptional children. So again, make sure in your OMAC that you address academically gifted, intervention team referrals, Title I if you have it, and English as second language. Make sure that you hit that. Your peer reviews have been good. You're filling up discussion board. It's going great. Assignment Dropbox is filling up. Everybody seems to be on task, and so I'm very pleased with that. Now, I want to talk to you a while tonight about task stream. There's Kenya's, and Kenya's joining me. Kenya, can you hear me? Okay. I think she's logging in, but we'll see if she can. So I want to talk to you about, hey, Kenya, how are you? Kenya, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Welcome. I want to talk tonight about putting your competencies in task stream. Please remember as continuing students that the only thing that's different for you, the new handbook, is how you prove that you completed your competency. As I've told you, in the past, we had a meeting with your principal at the end, and you had to go through with each of the competencies and say what you had done to achieve those. And it was a list of activities. Now we have you put them into task stream. So I am going to walk you through how to bring up your task stream competency folio and then what to put in that. I've created a couple of documents for you. I already have them under intern materials. And so we'll look at those tonight for a while. So new share. And let me go to task stream. All right, from your task stream login page, when you log in and you put your sign in, before you go into your DRF or your program, if this will hurry up and load for me here, you have a message folder. If you will go to that messages and click on revise competency template, and then scroll to the bottom and click on competencies again, and then hit the copy button over here to the right. Let me move this one out of the way. Hit the copy button, and yes, I want a copy. You can then go to your folio and web pages, and you will have this red competency box. When you open that up, it will display the 21 competencies over here on the left. And that's where you upload the proof that you have satisfied those competencies. Right now, I'm advising students that we're not doing the professional dispositions because you already have dispositions in your regular task stream portfolio, and we're not worried about the digital learning competencies at this time. We may address those later, but right now we're not. We're only going through visionary with the 21 competencies. So if you click on communication, the first of those, you'll see that you have to have a proof that either comes from Evidence Artifact 1, which is the app cell, Evidence Artifact 6, the SIOP, or one from open-ended. And you say to me, well, Dale, what would be an example of that? So what I have created for you, and please remember, you get to pick which one of those three you want to do. You do not have to do all three. You only have to do one. So what I have created for you are a couple of documents that tell you what acceptable proof of communication is from either your evidence artifacts 1 and 6 or open-ended from the 400 hours of internship work that you're doing. So these two documents can be found under intern materials in Blackboard. So let's look at open-ended to begin with. Open-ended Open-ended are just simply that list of suggested leadership activities that you do as an intern. And the reason why is if you do these things, you will have hit the 21 competencies. So what I have done is I have categorized them for you. So if you're looking for something from open-ended from your experience as an intern to put in there as proof that you have satisfied the communication competency, just look at this list. Address small and large groups of adults. That's a proof of communication with them. And so you would put a flyer or a minutes or an agenda where you addressed you were on the program to address a group of adults. You can look down and find other examples from these things. When you attended PTO, PTA, PSA open house, that's an example of communication. If you had parent conferences, if you put your parent conference schedule in there. So what I have done is all of these 21 competencies, I have categorized when you do these activities, these open-ended activities, this would be an example that you can put in or a proof that you satisfied that communications competency. So that, again, this document can be found in Blackboard under intern materials. Now, Let me close that one out. Resume share. Okay, share screen. All right. Now, you say, but Dale, I want to put something in from one of my evidence artifacts. Well, what I've done is I've taken that list of artifacts that you will generate from having done each component of each of the 6 evidence artifacts, the actual artifact that would have been generated by doing that. For an example, when you did 1A, set up your PLC and had your first PLC meeting, the examples of things that you generated were an email PLC permission from your principal, a screen grab of that, a PLC agenda minutes, and you took a picture of that PLC meeting. Now, as you can see, those are examples that could be used for competencies 1, 3, 6, 12, and 20. So what are competencies 1, 3, 6, 12, and 20? Well, 1 is communication. 3 is conflict management. 6 is delegation. 16 is results orientation, and 20 is time management. So any of those things would fit in that category. So what I have done for you is I have categorized each of the artifacts that you will have generated from doing the 6 evidence artifacts and categorize them where you can use them to put in for your competency proofs in your competency folio. Again, this document can be found under intern materials on Blackboard. So let's go back. Let's go back to task stream. And again, that's where you put them in. So let's go to Drew's. And this is one of my interns, and this is here's his portfolio. This is what he has shared with me so far. For communication, see the last 4, he put in his skip D, which would be open-ended because it's not 1 or 6, but it shows communication, and he wrote a sentence explaining why it represents communication. And he's done that for each of these. Some of them are a PowerPoint, and he explains what, the change management represented in that PowerPoint. For conflict management, he has used, he's got you can't see it, but I can open it up. He's got a text here that he created, and he explains it, and he pulled out the cogent points from it here, from this text that he created. Creative thinking, he uses a screenshot, and he explains, in order to increase staff buy-in and create a collaborative atmosphere, I created a Google community in which peers can share their creative ideas. And he's got a screenshot of the website, or the Google community web page that he created. That's just a screen grab, and so on. So you can see. So what you do is you put your proof in there, an artifact or something that you did, an item that shows what you did. You write a couple sentences, and then you request comments so that your clinical coach can look at that and say, yes, that fits, or no, it doesn't. Now, later on, there will be a submit button where you can submit that for evaluation, but right now we're just putting them in for comments until students kind of catch on and get the hang of them. Delegation, let's see what he put in. He put a PDF form in there that he created for delegation. Dialogue inquiry, another screenshot. See, these things don't have to take that long. I worked with Drew on this and had him do all 21, and he did it in less than 3 hours, which, again, that's about the length of time that it would take for us to do this with the principal at the end. So this is fairly easy. As soon as you set up your competency folder, you can start dropping examples of those competencies in there. And again, for the examples of what you drop in there, go to intern materials and look at those 2 documents that I have put in there for you. Let me let me log out of TaskStream, and I'll go back and show you that. New share. And so under intern materials, down at the bottom, I have the competency folio artifacts from the 6 evidence artifacts. These are the ones that are generated. These are the items of proof that are generated by doing your 6 evidence artifacts. And then your open-ended ones are there that are generated from you having done your 400 hours. So if you don't know what goes in there, just look at these documents. I have them right here and ready for you. So competency should not take very long. It should be fairly easy. I've given you examples of what to put in there. It's all pretty straightforward. And again, the open-ended one came from the suggested activities list that you're supposed to be doing anyway. So competency isn't anything new. It isn't anything different. It's just how you are showing competency has changed from having a meeting where you had to do a presentation to just putting them in a Dropbox here in TaskStream. So it should be much easier and quicker, actually, less stressful. You know that you've passed them before you get to the end, and all of a sudden you hadn't passed them. Your principal says, no, I'm not sure that they did these. We've already checked off on them by then, and we know that you did them. So that's good. All right. Kenya, any questions from you? All right. So as I told you last week, excuse me, we caught up on the discipline. I finished a week early, and so I wanted to talk to you about job interviews this week. Now, there's 2 reasons I want to talk about job interviews. Number one, hopefully you'll get a job once this program is over, and you need to get through the process of the interviews. And it is a process. There's 4 separate and distinct interviews. But also, when you get to be principal, I think the most important thing that you do is hire new teachers. If you hire good teachers, your job is much easier. If you can find people who are willing, you can make them able. The problem is if you make bad hires, you can't advance your organization. You don't get held accountable for people that you inherit. You get held accountable for working with them to make them better. But you are held accountable. I can tell you, as a former central office person, we do hold principals accountable for the people they hire. And if you hire bad people and wrong numbers, we have to question your judgment and ability. So part of what I'm doing is helping you to get through the interview process, but also for you to begin to understand the interview process and what you're looking for when you become an administrator. So the first interview that you may have, the first round, is either going to be an oral interview where somebody asks you a preset set of questions, and this is to get you into the applicant pool. This is before you're actually in the applicant pool. This is mostly used in larger districts, but a lot of smaller districts are using it now, where they ask you a series of questions. The questions usually are related to the Gallup organization. There's a book that you're going to read in 605 called Strength Finder 2.0 by Rath and Conchi, which is a Gallup book. Basically, it talks about your strengths and what folks are looking for in terms of administrative strengths. The thing to remember about that interview is they're going to ask you 60 questions, and they're not going to be essay questions. They're going to have pretty much they're binary. There's an answer, there is a right answer. Now, the trick with those 60 question interviews, the first round, is they're done in sets of 12. There's 5 sets of 12 questions. If you don't get through all 60 questions, then you don't make it. But they count up your score at the end, and if you score 40 or better out of 60, then you make the applicant pool. But there's also some landmine questions. There's one question in each of the 12 sections. If you answer it wrong, it doesn't matter how many you get right, you'll be out. They'll end at the end of that section. You won't even get to the 60 questions. And you say to me, well, gosh, that sounds kind of harsh. Well, that's you know, school districts don't have the money to put everybody that applies for jobs through the entire process in terms of setting up meetings, health screening, doing background checks. All that stuff is time consuming and expensive. And so they have to have a way to weed out the people that they're never going to hire anyway. And that's what that first round of interviews does. And so in that 60 questions, there's going to be questions like, are you always on time? And if you say no, we don't have, you're out. Well, I try to be, but sometimes I run late because of the kids or because of this. The answer is yes, I'm always on time. If you answer anything other than that, you're going to be out. The thing you have to understand about the school business, it's driven by time and by clocks and by bells. You know, our number one focus in the school business is time in terms of management. And if you're not an on-time person, you don't really get it. You don't really understand what schooling's all about. You can't say, yeah, I'm late every now and then. No, then you're out. So that's an example early on that you'll be asked something like that. Another example could be if it paid the same, teaching and school administration, being a school principal and being a teacher paid exactly the same. Would you prefer to work with students or adults? And if you say students, you're done. Please remember, administrators, you are potential administrators, you are interviewing for an administrative job where you supervise adults. You don't work with kids anymore. You might see them in the hallway or in the rooms when you go in and do evaluations, but you work with the adults now. And so if you say, I prefer to work with kids over adults, we don't need you as an administrator, because then we know what your hide will be. You'll be hid in the classroom somewhere, having a good time with the kids or out on the ball field and not doing the things that you need to do as an administrator. What we're trying to determine is what your hide or your dodge is going to be, or if you have any. I used to have to ask administrators when I supervised them, what were you doing that took up the time that you were supposed to be doing what we were paying you for? What were you doing that you didn't get around to doing what we require you to do? Well, I'm just so busy, I couldn't get to that. Well, tell me what you were doing that precluded you from doing what you were supposed to do. That won't last long in this business. We'll find somebody else. If you can't get around to doing your observations, or if you can't get around to doing the things that we paid you to do, discipline referrals have piled up on your desk as an assistant principal. Kids aren't being processed. The paperwork isn't being put into NCYs, or excuse me, Power School. I need to know what you were doing rather than what we were paying you to do. And so it goes back again to, do you want to work with adults? If you do, then there's adult things that you have to do. And there's more of those kinds of questions. What kind of grades did you make in school? If you answer, boy, I just get skimmed by the skin of my teeth, we're not looking for you. Those are the kinds of questions. That's 3 examples. I'll probably come back to this later in the semester and spend a little more time on this one. But I just need for you to know that at the first level, there is going to be a way to weed out the people that they don't want to spend the time, effort, money on to put through the process. If you don't have that oral interview, you may have a written interview. That written first interview, a lot of districts are doing that now. They give you a set of scenarios. Let's see if I can pull that up. Here it comes. And there's usually, they want to see what kind of decision-making process that you have, but don't be fooled. There's also there is also some hidden things in here in terms of law and those kinds of things. Let me give you an example. Again, this is under intern materials. I'm not going to go through all of these. But this is a situation where they give you a set of emails. I think it's 20 some odd emails, and they give you 90 minutes. And what you have to be able to do is classify them. Each of the emails is urgent and important. Urgent, but not urgent, but it is important. Urgent, but not important, and not urgent and not important. Now, an example of not urgent, not important would be like a spam email. This one here, all expense paid vacation, that's a spam email. That one's not urgent, not important. And so as you work through these, you're to classify them. Now, the trick, the drop dead on this one, the landmine is, if you have anything, if you've classified any of these 20 some odd emails, let's see how many are there again, 21 emails. If you have classified any of these 21 emails as urgent but not important, you're out. There's no such thing as something that's urgent but it's not important. That's the landmine on something like this. If you think something is urgent, needs to be dealt with immediately, but it's not important at all, you're not a rational thinker. That would knock you out immediately. Now, there's a couple other knockouts in this list of things too, that if you get them wrong. So that comes down to the next thing. They want you to tell them what action you're going to take on each of these items and the reason why you're going to take that action. Now, let me give you an example of another one that will knock you out. That's a landmine. Let me go back up. Dear Dr. Brown, the newspaper would like to do a feature on you as a new principal, and I need to set up a time for interviewing you and some of the teachers and students. Please respond as soon as you receive this email and let me know a good time to come out. Thank you. Tom Roberts, State Educational News. All right. This is a landmine right here. This one's not urgent, but it is important. It's not so urgent that you need to respond to Tom Roberts, because there is a policy in your school district that says that you do not speak directly to the press. You would forward this to your public information office. And if they wanted you to speak with Tom Roberts, they would go about either giving you permission to set up the meeting or setting the meeting up themselves. And they certainly might want to coach you in that meeting. But you would definitely not get in touch with Tom Roberts yourself, because your district has a policy against speaking to the media without approval. That's a landmine question. So if you said the action I would take would be get back, this one's urgent, not urgent, but it is important, I would get back to Tom Roberts immediately, or next day and set this up, then you're out, because the policy in your district is that you do not get in touch with the media. The school district will do that for you. So that's a landmine kind of question, but you have to work through these things in it. Let's see. So this one under item number 9, Dr. Brown, we may have to shut off the water for a short time during the first week of school to repair the main boiler. I know this is a bad time to be shutting off the water, and we hope it won't be necessary. Sam and I are trying to get the thing fixed ourselves, but we have to call upstate to see if we can get it done. They can't get here until a week after Labor Day weekend. Even that is uncertain. So I'm trying to get them to come at night. I'll check back if anything changes. Al, the head custodian, you can't turn the water off during the day. So this landmine is the health department would have a fit and fine you if you turn the water off for students in the building. You have to know that. So that's a landmine question. That's not going to happen. You have to tell Al that that's not going to happen. You have some other ones in here, but Most of these are fairly straightforward. As I said, there's a couple of landmines. Remember, on something like this, there's no such thing as something that's urgent but not important. Um, Make sure that you know the law and know all the policies in terms of you're not supposed to speak to the media, and that you can't have the water off while kids are in the building. And you can't close your school when others are open, not voluntarily. Um, so those are kinds of things that you need to know. So this is the first round of interviews. Again, this is a way, an objective way to thin the herd, to make sure that, if we have 100 applicants and we can only have the money to put 20 through the process, that we weed out the kind of the wild cards, the ones that aren't very good, that don't know the law, or are just doing it because they think that it pays more money, don't really want to be involved with adults. Those kinds of things to weed out the crazies to start with. All right, so that's the first round. Now, the second round of interviews, after you've gotten through this round and you've made it into the applicant pool, there we go, is the group interview. This is where generally, sometimes they might be an assistant principal in this group, but that's kind of the focus group chairman. But this is generally a group of parents and teachers, or maybe teachers with a parent or two. And if it's a high school, sometimes this group has a student on it. But this group is kind of a mixed bag. There's professionals like teachers on it, but there's also lay people like parents and students. And so your job is, the trick in this interview is not to use so many acronyms and educational jargon that you lose them. You got to kind of translate, when they ask you questions, you've got to kind of translate the educational jargon that you would normally answer with into something that the lay people in the group can understand. So let's look at that. And so what we've done for you here is kind of translate. So let's look at the questions. This is in a PowerPoint form. Remember, this is a mixed group of people, both people inside and outside of education. So the first question is, briefly describe what you perceive as the leadership style. These are the look fors that you should be saying. Things like avoiding personal conflict, focusing on issues, child-centered, courteous, respectful, willing to listen. These are the kinds of things that you need to say, rather than using these are, instead of saying I want to be a transformational leader, my leadership style is transformational, you have to tell them what transformational means. Positive, approachable, open to changing new ideas. Instead of saying participative or transformational, these are terms you'll learn in 605. You need to define for them. You're kind of making it so that everybody can understand it. Assessment driven. We often hear that assessment drives instruction. How would you help a new teacher to understand and use the data available in school to make sound instructional decisions? What you would do is you'd speak to data analysis, development of teaching strategies based on needs of students, willingness to plan collaboratively. Basically, what you're talking about here is PLCs. That's what you would do, is you would use PLCs to help a new teacher begin to understand how to use the data. But only the educational people in the room would understand the use of one-on-one peer coaching and PLCs to work with new people. You would have to explain to them in layman terms development of teaching strategies based on needs of students, which is needs assessment, willingness to plan collaborative, that's PLCs. You basically have to take what you've learned in this program and fit it to your audience. That's the idea. Describe instructional practices you like to see as you walk through the building. You know, and you have to, go back to Marzano, best practice, effective use of resources, engagement. You wouldn't be able to talk about non-linguistic representation. You just have to explain, best practices. You'd have to use that kind of terminology rather than similarities and differences, question including, because the lay people in the audience wouldn't understand any of that. A seasoned teacher comes to you upset by the progress of her class. She blames the children for their performance, is frustrated by their lack of effort. What would you say? You have to have them be accountable for high expectations. Basically, you have to explain EC and intervention without using EC, intervention, and EVOS, because that's basically what we're talking about here. In the EVOS model, it doesn't matter what level they come in. We have an intervention team. If you think that they're EC, you can refer them to those. And so you basically, instead of saying EVOS, EC, and intervention, you would explain these things. And so basically what we've done is we've given you talking points here for the kinds of questions that you're going to be asked. The questions are going to be posed by the professional, but the answer has to be designed to satisfy the professional who asked the question, like the assistant principal or a lead teacher, but also the lay people on the group. You have to make your answers fit your audience. That's the whole secret of getting through the group interview. If you talk over the head of the lay people, they won't like you. That's just the way it works, and things won't go well for you. So again, the trick with the second level group interviews is professionals compose the questions and ask you those, but your answer has to account for the lay people in the room. So that's the second round of interviews. This is a good one for you to keep so that you'll know the kind of questions to ask when you get to be an AP. Unless the district has a set of questions for you, this would be a good set. All right. Let's move to the third round of interviews. The third round of interviews is the principal interview. This is when the principal interviews you individually. It's a one-on-one interview. Now, this one is going to be heavy on specifics. It's going to be heavy on jargon. You have to use the vernacular, the shorthand language of the system, of the school business, the school system, so that it doesn't take you forever. Again, know your audience. The principal knows all these terms. They know what M-class is. They know what EVOS is. You don't have to explain that to them or break it down. This is the time when you get to show off what you learned in this program and all the terminology that you know. And you need to be specific with it. So let's look at that third. These would be the kinds of questions that principals will ask you. Some of them, they start out kind of general and nice, but then they get a little more specific. And so they'll let you talk about your background, why you wanted to become, what your goals are, those kinds of things. But then they'll ask you your professional strengths and weaknesses. They'll ask you your 3 best leadership qualities, so you better know the qualities of different leadership styles. One situation where these qualities were exemplified, that they're asking you to put in and tell them in practice how you applied situational leadership. How would you improve school community relations? You're going back to that needs assessment. You go back to TWC. You go back to the skip that you did during your portfolio. How do you view the current teacher evaluation procedures used? You better know about McCrill or it's called Power Source now, the teacher evaluation system. You need to be able to speak to that. Describe your philosophy of discipline. You need to understand PBIS and be able to use that terminology. Instruction and classroom management are related. That goes back to discipline and management that we've covered this semester. And it also speaks to PBIS. How would you rate yourself as a disciplinarian? You better be able to, to talk about due process, following the due process, arbitrary and capricious. That you will be fair and honest and the same with everybody, and that you will follow the handbook and won't be capricious, give more than the law allows. So you need to be able to explain that kind of terminology that I've gone over with you. There's a lot of questions here. If problem arises, what support services? You need to be able to speak to the MTSS model, and that's why I had you find out about that, because that's one of the big questions that you'll be asked. You better know what MTSS is, the intervention team, whether it's called intervention team or care team or whatever it's for school. You better be able to speak to the 90-day EC process that follows that MTSS also, because you're going to be asked that question. Do you think schools should be single point of service providers? What that means is one-stop shop, legal help, all those kinds of things that schools do. You better have a point of view, and you better be able to explain your point of view. There's a lot more questions in here, and most of them are very specific and very jargon heavy in terms of you need to be able to speak in shorthand to your principal. Again, know your audience. The principal knows all this stuff. You need to convince them you know it too. Completely different audience than the group interview. Looking at my time here. I'll go over this. I'll try to find some more time later in the semester where we can go through these a little more, a couple of them more in depth. All right, the fourth and final interview. This has become relatively new within the last 5 or so years. Superintendents are beginning to get involved in interviewing assistant principals. During my time, that never happened. Some rural areas, it's still not happening, but it's happening more and more every year where superintendents get involved in hiring assistant principals. And the reason why is they can move those, as Mo said in Greensboro, if I hire you as assistant principal and you do well, I know that I could move you into a principal role. But I don't want people in assistant principal roles that I'm never going to hire as a principal, because that's become a necessity because of movement. Principals don't stay as long as they used to, and they certainly don't stay at the same school like they used to. Principals have become contracted employees and are much more mobile and chase the dollars and chase the good schools and the jobs. And you may have openings that occur right in the middle of the year. I know right now I've got an intern in Charlotte. Well, she has class in Charlotte. She's in a neighboring district, and her principal is leaving this week or next week, right in the middle of the school year. That never used to happen. It happens all the time now. And so what's going to happen, they'll have to shift an AP into that role right away, and maybe advertise for the job full time later on. And so APs get promoted overnight almost nowadays because there's so much movement in the principal ranks. But superintendents want to be involved in the hiring of assistant principals now, either area superintendents or superintendents in small districts. And so now many AP candidates sit down and do superintendent interviews. The kinds of questions that you're going to be asked as a superintendent interview are more global, philosophical kind of questions. Now, there has to be some content. You have to know some content too. Here are the things that I see mostly in those interviews, and let me pull that up. The first one is 21st century skills. And I have a short form, what the 21st century skills. So you better review that one so that you're able to speak to 21st century skills. I've got the short form and the long form of those here, again, under intern materials. And then I've got ones, the superintendent's going to ask you, how are you going to implement those 21? I've got a really good document here on the 6 steps to implementing 21st century skills in school. This may be the one that you need to spend the most time on if you're going to have a superintendent interview, because that's the kind of things they're going to ask you. All right, you know what 21st century skills are. You agree that they're important. Tell me how you would implement them in your school. This is a document that helps you with that. And then the last one is North Carolina Future Ready, which basically is North Carolina vision from the legislature of what 21st century skills are going to cause education to look like in North Carolina. You better study that one. If you got a superintendent interview, you better know that one backwards and front. So these last two here, which is the ones I'm going to go over with you. 6 steps to implementing 21st century skills. Let's open that one up. This is a how-to. And so this is and there's the 21st century skills. You've seen those before. But here's what's important about this one. The actual steps, the 6 steps to implementing 21st century skills. Increasing awareness, assessing your current state, narrowing to a manageable number of skills. You get to pick the ones that you think are important to start with. Planning, implementation, and evaluation and continuous improvement. And it tells you how to do these things. It just doesn't give you the bullet. It tells you how to do that bullet. But this one's very important. Again, superintendent interview, they'll ask you about 21st century skills, but they just won't ask you, do you know what they are? They will assume that you know what they are. What they're going to ask you is how you plan to implement those in your school. All right. And the other thing is you need to be very familiar with future ready students for North Carolina. This is what, as a result of implementing the 21st century skills into your school, what would that make students coming out of that school look like? And so here's North Carolina's vision for what future ready students are. Students who have gone to school and been taught the 21st century skills. So as you can see, this is from the State Board of Education that came out of the General Assembly and the State Board. So if students are taught 21st century skills, this is what they should look like. And it tells you exactly what the state expects those students to look like as a result of having been taught 21st century skills. So those 2 documents are critical if you are going to be interviewing with the superintendent, because they're not going to ask you how to schedule a school to have 3 lunch shifts. That's not what they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you the big global questions of how you implement 21st century skills and what those students should look like. Well, how would we know if we were that we were doing the right things? And as I said, the state board and legislature has said if we implement those skills, this is what we would expect our students to look like. So those are 2 very important documents. So those are the 4 types of interviews that you have to get through to get that first AP job. Again, you have either an oral or a written interview where somebody just gives you a piece of paper and tells you to answer the questions, or somebody just asks you questions, they don't elaborate, and you just give the answers. You make it through that. You have the group interview, but again, you'll be asked questions by a professional person in the business, but you will have to modify your answers to be inclusive of your audience, who will have lay people in it. The third interview will be the jargon interview, as I call it, with the principal, where you can use all the acronyms and jargon, and you'll need to be specific and show your knowledge of those terms and things like arbitrary and capricious, PBIS, due process, all the things that you've learned. You'll need to be able to speak to those. And then the fourth interview, you're going to have to be able to speak to more global things like 21st century skills and what that looks like and how you would implement it in your school and what the students would look like on the exit end of that, which is future ready. So those are the 4 types of interviews that you can expect to go through to get your job. These are the things that you can see where you fit in as a principal, and there's a good list of questions. Usually there's a list of questions prepared by your district. If not, there's some really good ones in that packet on the principal interview, the third round of interviews. So I see my time is about up. I will revisit this again later this semester if we can move through the material quickly and I can carve out another week. I will expand on these. I will actually bring my Gallup books and read you some of the questions from the Gallup first interview, the oral first interview. You can click on the internal materials. You can read all the scenarios in the written first interview, and you can read all the rest. I can't post the Gallup stuff. It's copyrighted, but I can read some questions to you. I will do that later, and we'll look at some of these a little bit further, maybe another night. Kenya, you have any questions for me on the interviewing?
Okay, I was trying to get the mute button to work.
Yeah, I see.
I don't have any questions about the interviewing. I do have some trouble with finding the competencies screen. She told me everything that I have on my screen. There's nothing there for me to upload anything, and
Okay, you've got to set it up. My guess is that you have not copied it into your Folio web pages yet. Let me go back and go through that process again. Let me close some of these things that I've got open. Okay. All right, again, from your login screen, log in.
Right.
And then over on the right-hand side, click on Messages.
Right.
Click on Revise Competency Template. Go to the bottom and click on Competencies. And you'll have this screen, and then there's a copy button up in the top right hand.
Okay.
Click on Copy. Proceed with copying. And then it will tell you that it's there.
Okay.
And you can go to Folios and Web Pages, and there it will be.
Okay, that's where I'm missing then. Okay.
And then when you open this one, if you will notice now, just like in regular task stream, when you click on Communication, it will give you the options down at the bottom of your page to upload your stuff.
There. Okay, that's what it is. Then I need to do the copy. I didn't. Okay.
You've got to copy it in there and then set it up. And once you do, it will then allow you to upload your items in there to show proof that you have met that competence.
Okay.
All right. Folks, if you have questions for me, call, email, keep up with your work, especially keep up with your evidence artifacts. And I will see you all next week. Y'all have a good week. Thank you.
Thank you.